Sounds like a good idea.
All right, so I'm Laura Richardson. I'm the SVP of Sales at Applied Frameworks. I'm also one of our consultants and educators, and I spend a lot of time working with customers around customer research, and especially around the use of innovation games. I worked with the inventor of innovation games for a number of years, a gentleman named Luke Homan. And so the kind of application of those in pursuit of problem solving and customer understanding is certainly a passion of mine, which is why Carlton and I like to work together so much. So Carlton, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Carlton Nettleton. I'm the Chief Product Owner at Applied Frameworks, and my responsibilities are around the product management of our different products, so our consulting products, our classroom training products, and our online academy products, our online training. Excuse me. The majority of my work these days is thinking about how do we expand our online training, and so that's really what I've been doing here at Applied Frameworks. But a lot of what I'm doing today is about trying to do some more with customer discovery and building out our playbook, our product playbook. That was some of our past webinar, and roadmap is one of the things that we talk about. In fact, we talked about it today.
All right. So what are we going to talk about then? We're just going to touch upon the business challenge that we see. And then the purpose of the roadmap, I think, is always a good discussion to have, right? It solves a number of problems, and it doesn't solve a number of other ones. So we'll talk a little bit about our perspective on the purpose. And then actually get into being interactive here. We'd like to show you by doing how we approach the creation of a product roadmap. And so it'll be probably one of our more interactive webinars. All right, so Carlton, we've actually talked about a number of these things so far. Do you want to catch us up?
Yeah, so let's just talk about the playbook. And the playbook, as we've talked in the past, and I want to keep this brief, is just a way that you describe your products or services through a series of lightweight documents, personas, buying journey, metrics, spec sheet, roadmap, right? These are just ways that you can communicate key information about your customers or your strategic goals to your stakeholders, to the development teams, to your customers and users in a way that's easy to consume. And the metaphor we use is a playbook, which is a physical notebook. And each one of these themselves, our frameworks, would be 1 or 2 pages in that notebook, which you can then share. So the idea is it's a portable, lightweight document that describes the key elements of your products and services that you offer in your organization.
Yeah, and I think for us, we have made the decision not to produce all of them right in the beginning, right? It's an evolving document. So in our last webinar, we talked a little bit about the development of personas and spec sheets. We're going to not talk about spec sheets at all right now. We'll touch upon personas, but really the focus of this is, okay, well, what's our roadmap look like and how did we build it? And how do we think you could leverage some of the things that we do?
Yeah, absolutely. It's iterative, right? And it's under development for us.
All right, so Carlton, here's our roadmap. Why don't you introduce us all to this?
So yeah, so let's take a look at this roadmap, and the roadmap's on the right, and on the left we used a framework called Prune the Product Tree in which to gather some data in which to fill in this roadmap. So what you see on the right is columns, now, next, and later, which are time horizons, and then the rows or the swim lanes are our different product offerings. So we have our consulting product offerings related to classroom training, online education, and then we have a little jammed up lane around customer discovery, like, hey, who are our customers, what are their needs? And then at the very bottom, we have some important market rhythms. This is a pretty simplified roadmap, but it is sufficient for our business. Our timeframes are what are we working on now, what's next, and then later is the future. Our company is about, what, 10 to 15 people, right? So we don't need a much more sophisticated roadmap than this. We have 3 major product lines, and then we just need to keep track of our customer discovery. So this, essentially what we do on the left is we do some collaborative games. This one here is called Prune the Product Tree, which we're going to use a little bit later. We identify, hey, what are the next things that we need to be working on? And we place them on the tree depending on how important they are. And then we take this information, we translate it into the roadmap here on the right.
Yeah, and for us, this answers those questions that, the sales department will ask, which is, hey, Carlton, when's it going to be ready? When can I talk about it? And it also allows all of us in the leadership team to have those prioritization discussions, and what is in the next category doesn't always stay there. So I think the other thing that we're real conscious of is that what's in now pretty much stays in now, but everything else as we move into the future, there's room for adjustments as we go along and as the market changes and as our customers' needs change.
Right, and the thing I hear a lot from our online students, but also our consulting customers, is a misunderstanding of, well, your roadmap is your plan. Your roadmap is not your plan, right? A roadmap is a communication tool, right, in which to align the people in your leadership team or your stakeholders around, hey, what are our strategic goals and objectives? The plan, like, hey, how are we going to execute that? Those are tactics, right? And so the roadmap is the glue between high level purpose and vision and tactics. Like, hey, how are we going to execute on this? So there is another layer here of execution that needs to be figured out. And for Laura's going to show in a minute, for a more complex product, our portfolio, you're going to have a little bit more complex roadmap, and you're going to have a lot more tactical plans.
Yeah, but I really like the point you just made, Carlton, which is this is not the sprint plan, right? This is not the detailed tactics. And obviously this isn't the expression of strategy in and of itself, right? It really is connecting that strategy to the tactics that happen elsewhere. All right, so you alluded to something else I'm going to show. So I'm going to, this is a more complicated view of a roadmap, and it's really hard to see. And so I'm going to just pop over into a different share and go into a more interactive version of the same thing. So what you're seeing here on the left side would be items that haven't yet made it to the roadmap, right? There are interesting ideas that our customers may have or people on our team may have had, and we and the product management team certainly wasn't ready to commit to anything there, but we wanted a place to hold some of our ideas. Some of them were small, might be little possibilities of things we could do with the product over time. This is also where we had space for big, crazy ideas, right? And so we wanted to capture that. We wanted to have a place for those, but we weren't ready to put them on any kind of roadmap yet. So they lived here. Then we moved over to a version of Prune the Product Tree, and I'm going to make this a little bit bigger so you can see what that looks like. So this is something we'll do in a minute, but this was a closer representation to, okay, what do we think we're going to be working on? And we had time horizons, meaning low-hanging fruit were things that we thought we were going to work on sooner. And as you moved up into the canopy, the growth of the product meant that things that were higher up in the tree were planned for later. All right, so for us in the leadership team, we would share this with customers. It was really clear, especially when people, it didn't take very long to learn the metaphor here. It provided a really quick way to communicate what are we building. And for us, our product had more than one area, right? So we replicated this down to, oops, I just want to move the framework here. So we had our kind of foundational layer was represented in a different tree. So your product may be complicated enough where it cannot be expressed with one tree. Well, then you just have a forest of trees. But again, if people wanted to look at, in our case, decision engine, which was a portion of our product, we had a decision engine tree. And then idea engine was another area of our product, and we had an idea engine tree. So this forest of 4 trees basically fed our product offering. Then real quick, and I know we want to get into some interactivity here, but I think this is interesting to point out. Over here now, we have an impact effort matrix. And for most of what we were doing, that was oftentimes empty. The reason that we had that here, and I'll zoom in a little bit more, was to support discussions that we had to have to align as a team between engineering and the business side. So we would have to figure out, okay, well, what's more important for the next time horizon? And it really, we were a small company as well, and it really did depend on, well, how hard is it to build and how much value does it bring our customers? Well, on the business side, I was part of the team that could represent, well, how valuable is this to our customers? But I cannot tell you how often I was wrong about how hard it was to build it. oftentimes I think something was really difficult and my CTO would come out with, oh, we've been working on that and it'll take us a sprint to get that done. And I'm thinking it's a 6-month thing. And vice versa. Something that sounds super easy to me was actually really hard to do for reasons I didn't understand until we had the conversation. So this was an alignment workspace that let us all understand value and complexity. And then we moved right over into, well, what's being worked on right now? Right? This is what was going on this sprint. That's what we had to do. I could tell what was going on in the sprint. I could tell what was ready to demo to customers. I could tell what was released and in production. And then did we update our website in order to express what we've just done? And then finally, we had our marketing area here. So we had a roadmap for our marketing area. And we also had our market rhythms area. So this were things like conferences and customer advisory boards and other things that might impact when we would work on certain things. So this was a really fast fire hose look at a more complicated roadmap. So I think one of the things that we'll be looking at, a couple of the frameworks we'll be looking at, think about them as not just something you might use as individual, for example, trees, but you might end up wanting to work with a forest. Carlton, I don't know if you want to add anything else to this before we move into some interactive work here.
No, I don't think so. There is a question, but I'd say let's not answer the question right now, Mark. I see the question. Let's come to it after we do the interactive work because we really want to get into the interactive stuff. Or maybe I'll do it in the chat. So we'll come back to this question.
Yeah,
sure.
we won't leave you unanswered because it's a valid question about when we start this. And let's head off to the interactive portion and we'll make sure that we get that answered. All right, so I'm gonna flip back over now into our presentation to kind of kick off what we're gonna do for the interactive piece. All right.
All right, so let's talk about the collaborative approach. So one of the things that we emphasize at Applied Frameworks is collaborate with your customers and end users and stakeholders to kind of create your roadmap, right? Don't create your roadmap in isolation. Don't create your product playbook in isolation. Leverage the knowledge and experience of as many people as you can. And the idea here is this tends to give us better results, superior results, because everyone's got a piece, right? Everyone's got a piece of who the customer's perspective is. No one person has all. And the other reason why we like this collaborative approach is it really gets the whole organization engaged in that conversation around what are our goals, what are our objectives, rather than just our product managers or our product owners. And I think the last thing that Laura often reminds me is, hey, why do we do this collaborative approach? It creates that shared understanding around who is the customer, what are their needs at all levels of the organization. So the more people you have participate, the more people that have developed that shared understanding and can execute on that. Laura, you want to add anything more about your experience with this approach? Okay.
No, I think we should get into trying it together. Right. Yeah, and then we'll see how this all goes. All right.
So here's our scenario. Let's all imagine back to where we were at around the beginning of March when we had the pandemic started, right? And around March 10th, everyone was told, hey, stay in place for an unknown amount of time. And so what we're going to hear is we have this problem statement that we've been under pandemic, we've been under quarantine related to the pandemic for about 30 days, right? And so people's refrigerators are starting to look a little bare, right? There's not a lot of stuff in there. And this is an actual problem that we had here in Portugal. I'm based in Portugal. And so in Portugal, the government extended the state of emergency. I think it was all the way until the beginning of May, for sure. Mm-hmm. And so we've got a problem, right? People don't have any food. People aren't allowed to enter their house except for emergencies or if you have an essential job. So how have the customers solved this problem, right? Well, in the past, what they would do is they would deliver home delivery of goods. The challenge is, though, in Portugal, if you wanted to order something online and get it delivered to your house, right? It's going to take about 30 days, right? Because since everyone in the country was working from home and staying from home, the major grocery chains did not have the distribution network, they did not have the infrastructure to support delivering produce to people, to people in their house. The other challenge that we kind of noticed though here in Portugal is it's more related to that picture on the right. Do you really want some stranger showing up at your front door during a pandemic, bringing groceries? Maybe not, right? And so we have a potential solution which we think that would resolve this, which is the drone delivery service, right? So a major supermarket chain in Portugal decided, you know what, we are going to anticipate a state of emergency until July 1st. And in order to do that, we've got to figure out how to solve this problem. If we're going to have a state of emergency till July 1st, how do we solve this problem of delivering people groceries to their homes in a timely manner in a way that's safe? And as it turns out, this Portuguese retailer had purchased 50 drones in January of 2020. So they were thinking about trying out this idea of drone delivery service. But the pandemic really just accelerated this whole problem. And they said, okay, the executive leadership said, hey, you're going to launch this in 35 days. And the question for the product managers and product owners is, who's going to use this service? What types of products might they order? And what features are we going to build in the first release and what's going to be in the later? And so we did some empathy mapping here. And as Laura said, we invited some customer service here to help us. And we're going to look at some of those results to help get you familiar to that. So Laura.
Yep. So we're basically going to put a link into the chat in just a second. You'll all be able to join and review the empathy map. So we're only going to spend 5 minutes on this, but we thought it'd be easier to do the road mapping piece if you kind of got into a shared mindset of who the customer is and what their problems are. So there's going to be a bunch of virtual stickies already added. You can click each one of them to read what it's about, what the customer is thinking, seeing, feeling. So this is something that we've done ahead of time with a bunch of stakeholders and customer proxies, and you just get to review it so you make sure you're all on the same page. The other thing that'll happen is you can move the stickies around and you can add more things. You're going to be in this forum with 3 to 4 other people. At this point, you don't need to collaborate, but you certainly could. So if you wanted to chat with the other people in your little group, all you do is click that little chat icon there and you'll have the ability to talk with the other 3 or 4 people who are in your group. In about 10 minutes, no, about 5 minutes, we'll just bring you back into this session here. So everyone's on mute already. We'll just stay on mute. Second tab opens, you'll work here. And then after about 5 minutes, we'll bring everybody back. What we want you to do is kind of get familiar with the customer, because if you don't really understand the customer, it's really hard to figure out where we're going with our strategic goals and objectives, right? And so what we're trying to do here, the first step is, hey, and this is a very simple framework, right? A lot of people are familiar with this, but this is important to get aligned into who the customer is before we start getting into the roadmap. All right, Laura. All right. We sent the URL out to the webinar participants, and by clicking on it, the people were organized into teams of about 3 to 5 people each team. They were given 5 minutes to review the contents of the empathy map that was created in the past with stakeholders, customers, customer proxies. This is a combination empathy map of 3 different forums that we ran. So it represents input and insights from about 25 people. So now we all are totally aligned and completely understand who our customer is. So the next thing that we want to do is actually go into that tree exercise. So let me share my screen again, and we'll talk a little bit about how that's going to go. What we have here is the beginnings of a roadmap, right? And what's really nice about Prune the Product Tree is that you think about this product, the drone product that we're building, as this organic thing that will grow over time, but we need to have some kind of MVP or our initial release. And that would be represented by low-hanging fruit. So what's the minimum thing that we need to have done in order to satisfy the problem that our customer is experiencing? And what you're going to see when we launch the next interactive portion is a tree that has some ideas already seeded. They're not put in the right place. There's 5 or 6 of them, kind of apples that are clustered near that middle of the tree. And what you and your 3 or 4 other folks in your forum will need to figure out is, where should those go? Are they the right ones to have? And what's missing, right? So you can add as many apples or as many water drops as you think necessary to kind of express what should this product be, what should it be in the near term, right? The sooner stuff at the bottom, the low-hanging fruit, and then what would be, how would this evolve over time? So anything that appears higher up in the tree would be later and not make the initial release, right? Supporting technology, if there are other things, certainly there's some probably more techie-minded people in here. If you can think about things that you want to add that might be considered enabling or supporting technology considerations, those could be expressed with water drops. Anything that you want to add, Carlton, to the explanation here?
No, very good. I like this. I'm looking forward to seeing what results we get.
Yeah, me too. Me too. Okay, so let me stop the share so I can get to my URL that I will stick in chat for all of you. The URL that we shared generated 3 teams of people, and each team spent about 10 minutes working together to create a roadmap or their vision for how the product that we were working on, the drone delivery system, how that would grow over time. So in this case, the low-hanging fruit were things that should happen sooner, and the higher up you go into the canopy, the expectations were that these would be delivered later in time. So it's not very specific in terms of exactly when things will happen, but you start to get a sense of sooner and later, and more important now, more important later, that kind of thing. So in 10 minutes, the teams generated some pretty interesting insights. So Carlton, do you have any, I know you participated in one of the forums. Do you have any things you want to share about what you thought about that?
Oh, I mean, it's fun. I mean, you get to see the different ideas and you can kind of play off of other people's ideas. So people came up with some creative ideas like sending prescriptions, which is a really good idea, but it does bring in some ideas around security. There was another idea in there with handling returns.
Mm-hmm.
So, hey, I want a drone to send something back to the store. That's interesting. Something also people mentioned was the number of trips it would make on a single transit. Right?
Yeah, or supporting multiple vendors, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and then if you were ordering from multiple vendors, could you have a chat line with each vendor that your drone is going to be stopping at, right? So is that possible? Sounds like a great idea to me, but I don't know if that would make it into the first version or not. All right, so
there was one I really, really liked, high-rise delivery, like from the 15th floor.
You just open your window and take your package.
Yeah. So I mean, why would go all the way down to the lobby, right?
Yeah, well,
it's kind of a hassle. So.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's good, definitely. All right, so I think what I love about this is, if you take a look at the trees that you were involved in, you can imagine something like this for maybe your own product. What this does is makes the discussion about your roadmap really approachable to every stakeholder, right? Just the idea of now versus later, and you're not necessarily having to get into the weeds about dependencies or getting into the weeds yet about complexity or time. Really what you're getting at with stakeholders is what's more important and what can you wait for? And sometimes that's the hardest thing to get a good conversation around, because you might be immediately getting too tactical, right? So this variation or this version of a roadmap certainly helps keep people on task with regards to how is this thing that we're all building together, how is it going to evolve based on the needs of our customers? Carlton, you want to add anything else before we go on to the last exercise?
No, I'm mindful of time, so I think we should head on to the next exercise.
All right, so I'm going to share a quick tee up to what we're going to do here, and then we will share the link to that as well. All right, so this is the now, next, later framework. Again, this one is really simple intentionally. It's what we use here at Applied Frameworks, and you guys will be able to kind of extrapolate how complex it needs to be for what you work on. There are ideas that need to be placed on the far left in the ideas area. So we've seeded it with what we think we need to consider. You can certainly add additional ones. I don't want to stifle your creativity for sure, but I thought it might be easier if we added some that you can start with. We have 4 swim lanes. We've got the product itself, and then we have sales enablement. So what are we going to do to help get this sold, if anything? What about customer service? And then are there market rhythms that we need to consider relative to this particular product? So one of the things that I know Carlton is very careful about when he leads us through our road mapping sessions is to make sure that we limit the number of items or have some kind of WIP limit for both what we're doing right now and then what's coming next. So you'll notice here that my request is that no more than 3 items get placed into the now and next. And then for the future, there are no limits for that. So that if you have other things you want to add in there, feel free to do that. Carlton, you want to add any other instructions to this?
No, I think you got it covered. I mean, if you think of market rhythms, stay at home order, July 19th, but if we've got market rhythms in there, 4th of July, Labor Day, right? You think about when we talk about market rhythms, they are discrete things that are going on where you might expect a lot of usage of the product or service.
After clicking the URL that we shared, the participants spent about 10 minutes using now, next, and later to generate a roadmap showing the near-term work, which has a really high degree of specificity and certainty. And then as you move outward in time, the degree to which things may change increases. Right? So by the time you're in the end of 2020, that would be the expected direction that the product is taking. But every time you revisit the roadmap, there's obviously opportunity to make changes and respond to what the market might be doing.
There we go. Okay, so team 1 had Santa Claus eventually being replaced in 2021, but we can see here that they adhered to the limits of 3 per box. So their initial product offering will have order tracking, anti-theft, and the delivery schedule. Those are the non-negotiables for the first release. And then the next release will include temperature control, address validation, and drone tracking. Yeah, so that's pretty cool. Any comments on that before I take a look at group 2? Carlton, do you have anything you want to add?
Nothing, no, looks interesting.
Yeah, kind of cool. So you can imagine, before I flip over to the other one, or actually while I'm doing that, that the, given time, what ends up in future, right, 2020, 2021 area, like far out in the future, I mean, this could be pretty full, right, of things that people want to add. I mean, for example, liquor delivery and making the, this is all about scaling, right? Scaling quantity, scaling products offered, all that kind of stuff. So that could end up being, pretty beefy over there. But yeah, I mean, we had to be real specific on what we wanted our first, the first release to do. So here we've got temperature control, delivery schedule, and fragile items made it to the first. And the next would be heavy items, multi-store offering, and yeah, again, heavyweight kinds of items. So very cool. Thank you. Thank you for doing that for everyone. All right, so let's we'll take a few questions for sure, but let me share something else here, and then we'll talk about some questions and wrap it up as well. Let's see. I'm getting better and better at switching around between windows and shares, but it's still not super fast. All right, so for us, collaborative road mapping really is a collaborative effort that starts with making sure, not making assumptions that there's alignment around who the customer is. And, I always think about alignment as being just a point in time. And if we're aligned right now, we're going to be slightly less aligned tomorrow, because we all have experiences and we all learn things, and our perspectives may change just a little bit. So 1 or 2 days may not matter, but 1 or 2 months might. So aligning on who the customer is, I think, is really important. Carlton, how about you? What do you kind of take away from this three-phased approach to developing a roadmap.
Well, I mean, look how much we accomplished in less than 25 minutes, right? We all came in, really didn't know what this problem was, had a vague sense, and at the end of 25 minutes, 30 minutes, we've got something. Is it perfect? No. Is it 100% there? No. But it's probably 40% of the way there. And if we spend another hour, 45 minutes, we'd probably have the 80% solution where everyone would be like, okay, I can take this back to my team and see what they say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, we have, not sure how many people are on the webinar right now, but how many of us are actually pretty aligned on what we want to do and probably feeling kind of excited about it? I don't know. I wish I had a little Skunk Works project going on right now where I could work on this. So that's the other thing too. It's like generating this kind of alignment and energy is important as well. All right, so what else do you want to know? This is a good time for questions. So let's see, we've got some in here. Carlton, do you have any that you want to tackle?
Yeah, there was Mark's question in the beginning, very early. It's like, how do we get this started? And I'm trying to figure it out again. How do you start the project roadmap? And then, so Mark, have we answered that question for you? Or is there, what more do you want to know?
And if you want to unmute yourself, Mark, go for it.
Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for this. This was really great. So the first question I have is, how would I start this with my team? How would I create this? What materials would I need? And then once I have the product roadmap, how would I move to the next step in terms of prioritization?
Mm-hmm. All right. So for me, I mean, what materials you need in essence is, I mean, if we were to do this physically, Post-it notes on a wall, big wall, tape. If you're doing it today in the COVID world, you're working from home, so you're going to use a tool like Weave, Miro, or Mural to kind of simulate that experience of moving ideas around like we did here. So do you have access to those types of tools?
So the firm right now is looking into whiteboarding tools. We have something that they built that's kind of proprietary, where you can upload a picture and then create a board, and people can go in and multiple people can add stickies. So is the starting point that I'd take the picture of that tree where you have the different levels, like what we're going to do in the future, what we're going to do now, and then I tell everyone go in. And then the next step, like you laid out in step 2, is then I tell them, what are we doing now versus what are we doing later? Is that kind of where you started off?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's the right thing. What I find most effective in this is, again, I wouldn't skip are we all in agreement about who the customer is and ground on that. So you might want to put 2 images in your canvas and say, here's who we believe our customer is. And if we have questions about that, let's align for 5 or 10 minutes to kick the meeting off to make sure that that is truly what we're all thinking. Right. And then you can, in the same image or on the same canvas, slide over to the tree. And my recommendation is to kick it off collaboratively, right? Have a meeting with your 8 people or your 10 people. And even if you only get 15 minutes with them, kick them off in the experience. And you can let them add over the course of a day or 2 if you can't complete it all together collaboratively. But my recommendation, especially for the first time, is not to send them a link and have them all do it individually, because I think you'll get a better result. And then, yeah, once you get to that point where you all feel the trees is where you want to be, the next meeting, I would ground on the tree and say, okay, let's review what we did. Okay, now we're going to move into now, next, later. And we have to be really specific about keeping the now small. If you have the tree available to ground everybody, then that again, collaborate on that. Don't let people do that individually. That would be my recommendation.
Yeah, I agree with the collaboration 100%. So will you guys send us some sort of soft copy of like this in a workbook form so that we can kind of, take these items and bring them into our prospective companies and make it work there?
Yep.
Like I said, I mean, ideally they would let us use a thing like a Nero, but they're not. So what I want to do is take these images, and then we can start using them.
Yep, we'll include them as attachments.
Okay,
yeah, and contact. I mean, if you for me, I don't know about Laura, but if you want like 15, 20 minutes, like, hey, I want to go a little deeper on this, can call us up. We want people to use these frameworks and be successful. And I always say to people, hey, just get in touch and we'll schedule 15, 20 minutes, get you started, and so you can be really successful. So.
Yep, you've got our email addresses here. Definitely, hit our website. You can contact us through that way as well. Yeah, I mean, we're both very passionate about this, and we have always had better results when we collaborate around this. Like, one of the other benefits of doing it is the cost of being unaligned is tremendous, right? You can waste months of trying to socialize decisions, and if you just find a way to include the right stakeholders, think about who should be there, that process of getting aligned could go from a month down to 2 hours. All right, so I can't impress upon all of you enough where it might feel more complicated to invite more stakeholders, but the reality is you buy yourself a ton of time by doing it.
Yeah, I agree. You know what would be helpful too, if it isn't too much work for you guys, almost like a 3-page template. Like this is the first thing you want to do. Here's the template. This is the next thing you want to do. Here's the template. And then here's the third thing you want to do, and something that's editable so that I could bring it into my company. Because ideally they would just use a industry whiteboarding tool, but they don't want to use that for compliance reasons. They're worried about information being shared. So
Sounds
having
yeah, definitely. It sounds like a good blog post. So we'll definitely do that.
Okay, yeah, that would be really helpful, because then I could just drop lift it in here, get the right people around the room, and we can figure out, what to do next. Because we really do spend a lot of time chasing people and getting them to do these things in Excel and whatnot, and they don't do them anyway. So maybe the visually is the better way to do it.
Great, thanks, Mark. Yeah, any other questions before we let all of you go?
One more.
Yeah. What you got, Carlton?
Oh, I don't have a question. I was just waiting. I wanted to get one more because I know we're going a little late, but I do want to also give like one more question people want to know. Bill says do stakeholder analysis. I think that's a good idea.
Yeah, I agree with that one, Bill. Make sure you know that you're inviting the right people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, bring the players, but also those context setters. If you're familiar with that framework, that's a really important. Context setters are very important.
All right, well, I think we're good. We would love to help all of you in any way that we can. So everything from questions to you want to engage us in a longer term session, happy to do that. We're passionate about it. We do this a lot, and we just thank you all for being such good, active participants.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Really good. Thanks.
See you.